A mother rabbit sits completely still. No predator touched her, no claws, no teeth, no injury of any kind. But researchers watching her that day already knew she was going to die, not from exhaustion, not from starvation, from fear, and the data they collected would force scientists to completely rewrite how they understood the relationship between predators and prey, because the predator doesn't have to touch you to kill you, it just has to be there. In 2018, researchers Kirsty MacLeod, Charles Krebs, Rudy Boonstra, and Michael Sheriff published a study in the journal Oikos that quietly changed everything ecologists thought they knew about how predators affect prey populations. They took pregnant snowshoe hares and placed them in enclosures. Then every other day they introduced a trained dog, a dog specifically conditioned not to bark, not to chase, not to make contact. It simply appeared for a few minutes, then it left. That was the entire experiment. What happened next is the part that still unsettles researchers today. The mothers who were exposed to the dog experienced a 214% spike in cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Their bodies triggered the full fight or flight cascade. Heart rate up, muscle tension up, digestion shut down, immune function suppressed, all from seeing a dog that never came near them. But here's where it becomes something else entirely. Adult female survival dropped by 30%. The offspring, the babies born to these mothers, had an over 85% reduction in survival rates before they were even weaned. 85% from a dog that never touched a single animal. The mechanism was cortisol passing through the placenta and the mother's milk, rewiring the offspring's stress response before they were even born. Their nervous systems were already primed for maximum fear before they took their first breath. The predator killed them across a generation without a single act of predation. Capture myopathy. The body that destroys itself. Now let's talk about what happens inside the body of an animal that is actively being chased. This phenomenon was first documented in 1964 in Kenya, and scientists have been studying it ever since. It's called capture myopathy, and it is, by every clinical measure, the body killing itself. Here's the sequence. A prey animal, a deer, an antelope, a zebra, detects a predator. The sympathetic nervous system fires. Adrenaline floods the bloodstream. The animal runs. But if that fear response is intense enough and lasts long enough, something goes wrong at the cellular level. The muscles, burning through oxygen at extreme speed, begin producing reactive oxygen species, ROS, toxic byproducts of cellular metabolism. Under normal conditions, the body's antioxidant systems neutralize them. But under extreme fear and exertion, the production overloads the system. Superoxide ions accumulate. These are converted to hydroxyl radicals, the strongest oxidant the body produces. And hydroxyl radicals do one thing: they destroy cell membranes. The muscle tissue begins to break down. Proteins from inside those cells flood the bloodstream. This is called rhabdomyolysis. Those proteins travel to the kidneys, which cannot filter them. The kidneys begin to fail. An animal that escaped a predator completely, no wounds, no contact, can be dead within 48 hours from this process alone. Scientists studying ungulates found that capture myopathy has even been documented in animals that were surprised by a predator with no extended chase at all. The fear response alone, without significant physical exertion, was sufficient to trigger the cascade. The body's survival system became the cause of death. The ecology of fear, an entire ecosystem restructured or independent of actual predation events. In the 1990s, wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone National Park after a 70-year absence. What researchers expected, wolf numbers would rise, elk numbers would fall. What they observed, the rivers changed course. This is not a metaphor. The elk, now aware that wolves were present, stopped grazing in open valleys and riverbanks, places where they had no sightlines, no escape routes. The vegetation in those areas, willow, aspen, cottonwood, began to recover for the first time in decades. The root system stabilized the riverbanks. The rivers narrowed and deepened. The entire physical landscape was altered, not because wolves ate a certain number of elk, because elk knew the wolves were there. Ecologists Liana Zanet and Michael Clinchy at the University of Western Ontario spent years quantifying this phenomenon across species: songbirds, voles, song sparrows. In each case, the mere perception of predator presence changed reproductive output, survival rates, and behavior. They called it the landscape of fear. The prey animal is not just navigating physical terrain, it is navigating a map of where death is more or less likely, and that map reshapes everything about how it lives, reproduces, and dies. Clinchy and Zanet's research demonstrated that in some populations, fear alone accounted for more population decline than direct predation. The predator's greatest weapon was not its teeth, it was the knowledge that it existed. In 2019, a study published in Scientific Reports by researchers at the University of Western Ontario did something no one had done before. They applied the clinical diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder to a wild animal population. They exposed black-capped chickadees to recordings of predator vocalizations, not actual predators, just sounds. Then they observed the bird's behavior and brain activity for 7 days. The results matched human PTSD criteria point for point. The bird showed a heightened, persistent sensitivity to danger stimuli. Their amygdala, the brain region that processes fear, showed elevated neuronal activation a full week after the sound exposure. Their hippocampus, which regulates memory consolidation, showed the same. The researchers concluded that predator-induced PTSD is not a human anomaly. It is a naturally occurring biological state that almost certainly affects survival and reproduction across species. One exposure to the sound of a predator produced a neurological change that lasted at least 7 days in a wild bird that returned to normal environmental conditions immediately after. The brain does not distinguish between the threat and the memory of the threat. In the wild, that distinction may cost an animal its life.